And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
Climate change.
Climate change is a real and serious issue.
Climate change.
People are suffering.
Climate change.
Climate change.
People are dying.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Entire ecosystems are collapsing.
Climate change, the largest issue humanity's had to face today. Today, I want to talk specifically about the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC, and its role in reducing the impacts of climate change and eliminating fossil fuel emissions en masse. So we know that humans cause climate change. We know that fossil fuel emissions cause things like icebergs melting, drought, wildfires, hurricanes, famine, conflict, death, disease, and destruction. And we know we play the main role in this. However, we're not doing anything about it. The UNFCCC was formed in 1992 during the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Its initial goals were to address climate change and stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations, but you might know it today from some of its key milestones, like the Kyoto Protocol in 1997.
The United States remains firmly committed to a strong, binding target that will reduce our own emissions by nearly 30% from what they would otherwise be.
Or the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015.
But after 21 years of debates and conferences, it is time to declare no more talk, no more excuses, no more 10-year studies, no more allowing the fossil fuel companies to manipulate and dictate the science and policies that affect our future.
Or its annual meeting of Conference of Parties, or COP. Most recently, COP29, which was held in November, was held in Baku, Azerbaijan. Its primary focus was on climate finance. The main achievement coming out of COP29 was the tripling of finance to developing countries, which today is $100 billion annually. And by 2035, that goal is going to triple to $300 billion annually. At the end of COP29, UN Climate Executive Secretary Simon Steele said something very important.
It only works if premiums are paid in full and on time. Promises must be kept to protect billions of lives. This deal will keep the clean energy boom growing, helping all countries to share in its huge benefits. More jobs, stronger growth, cheaper and cleaner energy for all. We needed this to be an enabling COP, one which helped translate the pledges of COP28 into real-world outcomes to protect people, prosperity, and the planet.
So, the whole purpose of climate funds are for developing countries to really have access and have the tools that a developed country would have when it comes to tackling climate change and sustainability. This could mean that a developing country who otherwise would only be able to afford fossil fuel emissions and fossil fuels to have energy and energy sources to develop now have the funding to access sustainable, renewable energy. This also means if there were to be a climate disaster, they would have funding to help with that disaster and potentially save lives. And this is all well and good. However, there's still a lot of problems to be addressed. Firstly, the fact that our biggest emitters don't necessarily need the money. The United States ranks second among fossil fuel emissions behind China. The EU is also in the top 5.
The first thing is you look at the list and you see that China is above the United States, not by a lot.
So, because these main emitters aren't needing the climate funds, they're not even really facing the brunt of climate change. And when there is something like a natural disaster or a climate event, like the wildfires we're seeing in LA right now,
Bad as it gets, with the potential for hurricane-force winds over the next 48 hours. 13 million are under red flag warnings.
or the hurricanes we saw in Florida this summer and this fall,
The death toll from Hurricane Milton's path of destruction currently stands at 16. More than 2 million people in Florida remain without power. Rescue teams are working as fast as they can to get trapped residents out of their flood-ravaged homes.
There's a lot more resources for folks to better be equipped for future climate events and to help deal with disaster and cleanup now. This is in comparison to a lot of other countries who really, really need those resources so they can make sure that their people survive. In fact, climate change and climate events are considered threat multipliers, which basically means that when there's a climate event like a drought or flood or famine, we see scarcity of resources leading to conflict. The thing about the UNFCCC, and hint it's in the name, is that it's a framework. And it does not have the same grip that legislation or regulation that a country or that a union would have. Notice in every single clip that I put from a COP or from a speech coming out of a COP, the main line was about what we need to do, how we need to continue to work, how this will only work if we do what we said we're going to do. And how many times are we going to hear that line before action is actually taken? At the end of the day, put yourself in a country's shoes who not only is dealing with a crisis caused by man-made climate change, like famine, drought, mass flooding, whatever the case is, they don't have enough resources to take care of their people, and now suddenly there's conflict breaking out. The countries who are supposed to be sending them money or the funds that they're supposed to have access to suddenly are unavailable, or countries just didn't uphold their end of the bargain. And so now climate change, which is made primarily by countries who have been developed for hundreds of years, are now repenalizing countries that are still trying to develop, even though not intentionally. This is what the problem is with climate change and climate funds. There is no real way to hold countries accountable for whether or not they pay, and it's not like they will feel the same problems that developing countries will feel with climate change. So the second issue we have to address is the lack of enforcement mechanisms. Because the UNFCCC is a UN body, and we don't have any real enforcement overseeing these giant superpowers like China and the United States, there's no real way to hold them accountable if they don't go forward on their promises. Which sometimes they don't. Especially for the United States. Especially considering the change in administration that's coming up.
Drill, baby, drill. We're gonna drill.
Actually incredible waste of taxpayer dollars that is fueling the inflation crisis. They spent trillions of dollars on things having to do with the Green New Scam. It's a scam.
Oh, what is the UNFCCC actually doing other than setting up climate funds to help incentivize developing countries to use clean energy? What else are they doing to help create a zero emissions world and get rid of fossil fuels? Well, they're working with the public sector and the nonprofit sector and the NGOs to help get the word out about climate change and set standards for different countries to hit by a certain amount of time. It's up to them whether they hit it or not. And they're working with private companies to help make greener products, make more sustainable products, and switch over to sustainable energy. But other than that, and like we've already discussed, there's a lack of enforcement mechanisms. There's a lack of accountability. There's a lack of power that this institution has as a whole and these regimes have as a whole to be able to create a more sustainable world. And I wish it was better news. But it's really up to us, to our countries, to set these standards and follow through on them. We've done it in the past. We got rid of CFCs and the aerosols, and we were able to start to completely change the way we made hairspray and refrigerators and everything else that required these ozone-eating chemicals. We've done it before, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to completely get rid of fossil fuels, but we've been able to do it. We're humans. We've been living on this planet for so long. What's stopping us from making that next step and just completely eliminating fossil fuels? We have the tools to do it. We're really starting to develop proper, good, sustainable energy. We're starting to develop good electric vehicles, and we're able to fuel them in a sustainable way. We're almost there. We just need to push countries to invest in the next step. So you, like so many others like myself, may be asking, what's the point? If we can't keep up with rising sea levels, with rising global temperature, with increase in greenhouse gas emissions, but what's the point of this? We can sit and we can act like throwing money at a problem that we're not even attempting to fix will fix it. We can sit here and we can act like us contributing drops of what is needed to fill up the bucket is going to save lives in places where it won't, especially considering the incoming administration and how they will withdraw from the Paris Agreement once again.
According to the New York Times, Trump's transition team is planning to reduce the size of some national monuments to enable more drilling and mining. The team has drawn up executive orders on withdrawing from the landmark Paris Climate Agreement, the New York Times also states. Under Trump's previous presidency, the US pulled out of the agreement before Joe Biden reversed the move during his time in office.
And we can sit here and we can act like world leaders actually want to solve these issues rather than keep profiting off of them. However, we can't not act. These agreements are important, albeit without the enforcement mechanisms. With empty promises, they're important for us to keep moving forward in the fight against climate change. And we need to remember this time and time again as we work towards eliminating fossil fuels, creating a more sustainable Earth, and making the world better for everyone. So I wanted to leave you with this clip, which will hopefully galvanize your anger, but also make you excited to hold these institutions and powerful people in governments accountable, so we can all live a better life and a more sustainable future for our children. Thanks.
How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you are doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight. You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe.